You're recording. All right. All right. So before we begin, any thoughts on the assignment that I asked you, assignment number 2? Well, if not, Brock, you want to say something?
I was just going to comment on the format. I mean, I think I like the looking up topics rate and then kind of expanding that out into how we can utilize that. I found that a little bit easier, not even easier, but a little bit more productive as far as applying that to what I do day in and day out.
Yeah. And kind of it's a good observation that you make, because one of the things which I've always struggled with in terms of how to teach this class, especially in a completely online format, and I think one of the things I realized was that all of you are master students, so which means that you should be ready to do some research. So I thought, why not give you the assignment before, and then we can have a discussion afterwards. Now, the only thing, of course, here is that I'm a little bit behind, so it could be that the discussion for marketing automation is something that I will record and then use it in a couple of classes from now, because I still want to talk about the basics of services. So I need to still complete what we were discussing in last class. Then I'll go into the basics of services, but then I'll make sure that I record a session on marketing automation, and I'll get to that as well. But what I'll also do in the meantime is that just like the recordings that you had in the past, where I asked you to take a look at the recording from Salesforce as well as Microsoft, I actually have a couple of videos of interviews with experts from the domain of marketing automation and inbound marketing. So you can actually see a couple of those interviews, which I will again send it across to you. So in case you don't want to wait till I actually come to that topic. And thanks to one of your classmates, Kylie, I was also able to talk to somebody from a company called Marketo, which is now part of Adobe. And you will see that for those of you, when you took a look at some of the suppliers who do marketing automation, that Marketo is a very, very well-known name. You'll also hear things like Pardot and everything else. But again, that's something that we will discuss at a later date. But again, yeah, I'm glad that you feel that asking you to do the assignment before, at least make sure that when I'm discussing it at a later date, you kind of know where I'm going with this as well. So yes, we will get to the concept of inbound marketing and marketing automation in a bit, but I just want one of you to try and tell me, why do you think I asked you to do the marketing automation assignment? Any reason why? One of you. Just or I'm going to start calling names. Kylie, why do you think I asked you to do something about marketing automation?
I think with how technology is forming so much with marketing nowadays, and how many clients people can take on and how busy schedules get, I think the automation process kind of helps connect the dots and smooth things over. So it's part of managing those relationships, but it's kind of making it easier on the businesses.
Yeah. So it's making it, but why would I want this in a class on CRM? See, this could be easily a class on business development, right? But why do you think I had marketing automation or inbound marketing in the domain of CRM? Bob, any idea?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I was going to say because the marketing automation is kind of that first step in like the relationship building with the customer, so it's what they're firstly exposed to. Yeah.
Indeed, fantastic. And that's what it is, right? Because and then if some of you have not taken a look at the assignments yet, there are things like account-based marketing, which is the same technology, and the idea can be used with your prospects in the initial stages or with your customers, where if you want to upsell or cross-sell, you can use these technologies to reach out to your customers without physically using the salespeople or key account managers to go visit them, thereby keeping your customers happy while keeping your cost of sale lower. And you'll also see when you take a look at marketing automation, when you did your homework as well, is you will see that marketing automation and inbound marketing stretches all the way from when you are trying to get a prospect all the way till when you're trying to build a relationship with the customer to get repeat business with the customer as well. So I love the fact that yes, a customer is not a customer once they become a customer. You need to start trying to build that relationship all the way from the beginning. And the beginning is also where you set the expectations to your customers as well. So again, if technology, as Kylie mentioned, is shaping these kind of things, you also should be able to say, okay, yeah, but technology is shaping these things. My customers are changing, but now instead of looking at it as, oh, how am I going to deal with it? Now the question is, how can I leverage this? How can I use this to not just inform the customers, set the right expectations? And when you did lead scoring, and the part about lead scoring, it's also about saying which customers do I want to choose to work with. And that is key, because you do not want to choose a customer or end up with a customer who is a pain in the behind later on. Or you might not want to end up choosing the wrong customer whose needs you can never meet because you do not have the capabilities yourself as well. So the concept of the customer relationship process does not start once you have a customer in. It's also about even much before, when you start setting the right expectations, choosing the right customers, and inbound marketing and marketing automation can really play a very, very important role there as well. And that's pretty much why I had that. And you'll see that the next 2 or 3 assignments are building up on that fact. Is you had your marketing automation, you got your leads. Now the question is, you're going to look at sales enablement. That is, how do I use my salespeople and how can I help my salespeople build that relationship with the customer? And then we'll start talking about customer success and everything else as well. So that's pretty much why I sort of have in my head, this is the kind of a structure that I have. So the idea of the first assignment was to try to gauge the importance of having a clear strategy. And then once you understand the strategy, I know I need to be customer centric. Then I need to start looking at customer journeys. And then how do I use the customer journeys? How can I use technologies and CRM systems to go all the way from the beginning before they become a customer? And how do I then take it through the whole process as well? Right? But before we get to that, typically I'm running a little bit behind in terms of content, but again, I'm glad that over the course of this semester, we'll actually touch on all these topics as well. Right? So now, hopefully by now, if you have not checked your emails, I've also done the first assignment, and I was very, very happy overall with the performance of all of you in terms of how you've done it. And you've also seen the kind of a rubric that I've come up with for this year to try and take a look at making it easy for me to grade it as well. So again, if you have any specific questions on it later on, just email me and we can have a conversation as well. And one last housekeeping is, the next 3 weeks, if you go take a look at your syllabus, I am traveling, but for each of the weeks, I will either make a recording and post it, or I might have additional interviews or reading that I might want you to read as kind of what is needed for that particular week. But my intention is to do 2 or 3 more recordings so that we will not be talking I will not be talking live, but I will be addressing certain content there as well. Right? So again, just be aware that the next 3 weeks there will be no class at this time, but I will try to make sure that at this particular time and every Wednesday I post some material there as well. All right. So now, if we go back, so I'm going to go back into where we left off last week. And last week, again, I'm going to do this again because of the fact that I was trying to explain this without you having a chance to take a look at my slides. And we were talking about the fact that, we were talking about customer intimacy, we talked about product leadership, we talked about operational excellence, and we said all of these are 3 different kinds of strategies that a firm can have. But you can have a strategy, but no matter what kind of strategy you have, you always need to keep the customer in your thoughts. You could be a product leader, but you need to make sure that you're helping the customer solve a problem. You can be operationally excellent, try to cut costs, but make sure that when you do that, you do not do it at the expense of your customers. And in the case of operational excellence, it also means knowing which customers you want to work with. If you have a customer who wants all the kind of benefits that a customer intimate firm can provide, then obviously you do not have the capabilities to meet the requirements of that particular customer. So which means that that customer should never have been targeted in the first place. So being operationally excellent is about also knowing which customers we want to choose from, which customer, and understanding their needs, and can we cater to those needs with our current capabilities. And that is what customer centricity is about. And you need to make sure that the customer centricity is irrespective of the strategy that you choose. You have to understand what that would have as an implication for being customer centric, right? If I'm a product leader, again, let me reiterate, if I'm a product leader, the purpose of customer centricity is, can I use my superior knowledge about innovative products that I can develop, but to help the customer? If I am operationally excellent, what should I tell my customers to expect? How should I make sure that I choose the right kind of customers so that I do not misalign between what I can provide and what the customer expects? So customer centricity is about knowing which customers to choose from and setting the expectations. And customer intimacy is more about exactly understanding what the needs of the customers are, right? Now, when we do all this, why do I say it's important for you to know what your customers want and everything else? Is that you might have a great strategy, but at the end of the day, your idea is, I need to be creating value as an organization for the customer so that the customer sees the value of what they're getting. And when they see the value, they're willing to work together with you to buy your products, to buy your services, to buy your solutions. And when they do that, when they pay the right price for it, that is pretty much where you get value of the customer. This is the part where you say, you know what, the customer has paid the right price. And if the customer is buying the right amount of products, price multiplied by your demand is going to give you your revenue. So the customer is giving you a lot of revenue, and that is exactly what you want as well. So remember, from the viewpoint of an organization, when you manage relationships with your customers, CRM is as much about maintaining a relationship with your customer so that you create value for the customer, but you do it because when the customer sees the value that they're receiving, they are going to stay with you longer, they are going to buy more from you, and you're going to create value for yourself as an organization, right? And CRM is not just, again, is as much a dual perspective where there is value for the customer and how you get value from the customer, right? So if you take a look at what is the value equation, value for the customer, and we discussed this as well. So again, just to jog your memory, we said value from the viewpoint of the customer is benefits over price, right? So which means that as far as a customer is concerned, the customer can increase their value in one of two ways. Either they can look for more benefits, or they should try and increase their value by trying to lower the price. And what happens is the fact that when you are facing customers who keep insisting on a low price, that is pretty much where you need to understand is that if there is a point where you cannot convince the customer about the benefits that you provide, then your ability to create value is going to be based on your ability to reduce the amount of benefits as well. So don't think of it from the perspective of, if the customer is asking for a low price, that we're going to give them more benefits to convince them. But actually, if the customer keeps insisting on a low price, you might want to say, you know what, if that is the price that you want, then are you willing to forego certain benefits, right? And that's what it is. And especially for those of you who are working in operational excellent firms, you will see that you might have customers who are more focused on price, right? If they're more focused on price, hopefully you're seeing the cursor. If the customer is focusing on price, then your way of making sure that you're creating value is to lower the benefits, lower what you offer to the customer, so that at the end of the day, that value equation is a balance between what benefits the customer gets and what price they have to pay, right? Because if the customer is not paying the right price to get those benefits, you are not going to be profitable. And that is evident from this kind of graph, where we said, if hopefully you remember from last time, where when I say value, this is the value that you as a company capture from the relationship with the customer, right? And the value capture can be by means of what price the customer pays, or value could be based on what we refer to as net present value, or net present value is something where it is about trying to take a look at all the future revenues that a customer is going to bring discounted for today. So for example, if it is saying that what is a net present value, if I'm taking a look at some customers and the customer today is paying and is buying some products from us, but you say, wait a minute, this customer has the potential to give us millions of dollars in revenue 5, 10, 15 years down the line. So that's great. That's $5, $10 million 15 years down the line. But the question is, what is that $15 million in 10 years from now worth today, right? And if I am saying something wrong, I know for a fact that some of you are finance majors. Anybody here a finance major? Or at least knows something about finance? No? Did I say something right about NPV, net present value? Okay, so well, I'm just then, if that's the case, you can go look it up. The idea is the value capture there need not always be about the price. It can also be about the future value that that customer is going to bring to us. So the idea is, again, depending upon what you want to capture, you have low value and high value. But understand, again, the value that you talk about is, in order for me to get that value from the customer, I have to make sure that I have to deliver the benefits, which means every benefit that I deliver to the customer, every product that I produce, every service that I deliver to my customer is a cost to me. So you need to take a look at this as the cost to serve. So again, this is a value equation from your perspective. So again, you'll have a low cost to serve and a high cost to serve. So again, what we said last time is, ideally you might want to be here, which is where you have the bullseye or the target, where it says the value capture is high. That is, you're going to make a lot of money with the customer. And this is an ideal customer where your cost to serve is low, which means that the customer is not asking too much from you and is paying a high price. Or the customer is not asking much, but you are going to get a lot of repeat business from this customer. And this is what is I call a honeymoon, because this usually does not last in a competitive marketplace, right? I call this a honeymoon, unless you're a monopoly. And if you're a monopoly, you can dictate terms. But if not, if there's healthy competition, chances are that where you want to be is here. So I call this heaven. I call this honeymoon, because usually honeymoons don't last. And then I call this heaven because this is a healthy balance for you to be in as a supplier. Here is where the customer is paying a good price, or you're going to get a lot of value with the customer over the lifetime of that customer. But there's a balance, because it's not that the customer is just paying, but the customer sees that you are working hard to deliver the benefits to the customer. So the cost to serve matches the value, so the customer feels that they're paying a fair price. Here, the customer may feel that they're being ripped off, but they don't have a choice. Right? So I call this is honeymoon, and this is what I call is heaven. This is nice. This is something that you can strive for, right? Now, where you do not want to be is this. Here is pretty much where you have a lot of problems, and some of you who are working in well-established organizations, this is typically where your key accounts fall. You think that key accounts are very, very good for you, but actually, if you take a look at the cost value analysis, you will see that key accounts are not that much in terms of value, because the cost to serve them is very, very high. If they know their key accounts, they're going to be asking more and more, they're going to become more demanding, and the cost to serve them is high. And this is what I call is hell. Right? Again, if you don't like the word hell, call it heck. Right? And then the last one is the whole. This is where you should be very careful about. Here, of course, the customer is not paying a lot of high price, or you're not going to be getting a lot of value with the customer. But if you're not very careful, your cost to serve is going to go up very high. So the cost to serve may not be low at one point in time, but if you get sucked into it very quickly, these customers can go up here. So this is what I call a hole. Be very careful about customers who fall under this. And so what this means is that as an organization, you are going to have customers who are in honeymoon and in heaven phases. So this is where you might want to be, and you want to avoid hell holes, right? So this is hell and this is hole. So what you need to make sure that when I'm talking about customer relationship management, I need to have customers who are here, not customers who are here. This is something that I really want you to understand. From a sales perspective, what this means is that for every one of you who has a sales territory, you need to ask yourself, within my sales territory, which of my customers are here, which customers should be here, which customers are in my honeymoon, which customers are in the heaven stage, which customers are in my hell, and which customers are in hole. And you should have a very clear strategy of dealing with your customers and each and every one of them as well. Let me pause here for a minute and let me see if you have any questions. Question clear? Lexi, you can just go ahead and all good. Okay. For the other, so again, if you have questions, just feel free. If you want to just type it in, that's great. Again, let's go on with what it is. So if you're sure of all this, now let's go to the next one. So now, if that is the case, if you say that not every customer wants the same kind of value because they're looking for different things, well, the first thing we need to start asking ourselves, which is part of CRM as well, is that, well, if I have to fulfill and create value for the customer, I need to start saying, okay, I cannot do this individually customer by customer, but I need to have a way by which I group customers together, and that's pretty much where you have your segmentation. Now, why am I talking about this? Let me go back. We talked about the concept of customer centricity, and we said it's about why, who, where, what, and how. We've discussed why should we be customer centric. The next thing is, if I want to be customer centric, what we said is different customers have different kinds of value. So let's start asking about who are those customers, and this is pretty much where we talk about segmentation. And what you have here is that most organizations have many ways by which they can segment their markets. And the three criteria that you normally see in organizations is they might start looking at segmenting their customers based on the profiles of the customers, and I'll show you some examples, or I'll show you an example. Or they may do it based on how does the customer behave, or the group of customers behave with you. Or the most difficult one is, how do I do needs-based segmentation? Now, can anybody tell me how do I connect needs-based segmentation, which is the most difficult way to segment a market, into the value equation? Anybody? So the needs-based segment. So what I'm saying is the needs-based segmentation is the best way if I want to talk about creating value for the customer. Why is that the case? How do I combine needs to this value equation? Oh, this value equation, yeah.
I think as you meet the needs of your clients, they obviously see much more value.
Yeah.
So obviously there's like a baseline expectation.
Yeah.
But then as you continue to add more benefits, they start to even see that, like, I think you call it like a customer surplus, like in terms of that, like they're willing to spend more because they're already getting so much more value than they originally expected. I guess that's kind of where I was taking it.
No, that's fine. See, you are right. So essentially, if you go back to the value equation, which I have here, see, normally what I say is the following. The benefits are linked to the needs of the customers. The customer has certain needs, but those needs, when you combine that with what you can offer those customers, those needs combined with the features of your product and your service, they become benefits, right? Now, whether you want to provide a surplus or not of benefits, that goes into identifying whether the customer is willing to pay a right price for it. But most of the time, what you need to understand, the link between needs-based segmentation and how needs-based segmentation, which I talk about here, is the closest to value, is because of the fact that anytime I talk about benefits are directly related to the needs of the customer. It's when the customer has a need and then you say, here is my product, and this product is going to help you achieve your needs or help you fulfill your needs, and then it becomes a benefit, right? So essentially, the most difficult way, if people start saying, I need to do value-based segmentation, what you can also take a look at is the closest to value-based segmentation is needs-based segmentation. And needs-based segmentation is one of the most difficult way to segment your market because of the fact that in business to business, a lot of times your customers are not willing to share their needs with you. And that could be for many reasons. One could be because the customers themselves might not know what their needs are. But a lot of times it's also because if you go back, when I say value is benefits over price, the more I tell you what my needs are, what you're going to do is that you're going to be able to translate that into benefits you're going to provide to the customer. And what happens when I'm increasing my benefits to the customer, if you go back to value is benefits over price, the customer might feel that they might have to pay a higher price to get those benefits. So sometimes customers will deliberately not tell you what those needs are. So the difficulty in needs-based segmentation, that is, if I want to take a look and say, these group of customers are looking for this benefits, these group of customers are looking for these benefits, it's very hard because either the customer cannot articulate what they're looking for, or they might not know themselves what it is that they're looking for. And the third thing also in a business to business, in the first class I was talking about the fact that according to recent research by Gartner, there are around 6.8 people involved in the customer's decision making unit. So which means that whose need am I talking about here? So again, there are so many difficulties, but if done well, the needs-based segmentation is going to be one of the best ways to segment a market. But from my experience, and if I can bet my bottom dollar that for those of you who are working for organizations or have interned at organizations, you will see that the way they segment the market is actually a combination of either profile and needs, or profile behaviors, or profile behavior and needs. Right? Again, one particular criteria is not going to be enough. But again, even when you do needs, it's never completely perfect. Right? So here are some examples. So if I take a look at profile, it could be based on the industry types. So essentially, hey, am I in pharma? Am I in medical devices? Am I in financial services? Am I in education? That is the industry. That's a profile. Again, it's something that you observe. There is no subjectivity to it. Everything is observed. It could be based on geography, right? Are you in the northwest? Are you in the north? Are you in the southeast, southwest? It's purely based on geography. Depending upon the kind of what you're trying to sell, it could be based on number of employees. It could be based on number of production facilities. So depending upon what your product that you're selling, you will also choose the profile based on that, right? For some of you who are in consulting, you'll hear the term verticals. Verticals is usually based on industry type. Some of you might have heard the term SIC codes. SIC codes stands for Standard Industrial Classification. That is again a kind of segmentation based on profile as well. Right? Now a little bit more. I apologize for this, but anything in blue that you see, right? Blue should be linked to behavior as well. But if you can take a look at the behavior-based segmentation, okay, quick clarification. Behavior I can spell. But this is the Victorian English. I was brought up in Victorian English, just to let you know. So I can spell. So for the Americans, you can cut the U from it. So if you take a look at the behavior aspect of it, it's based on, okay, how is the customer behaving? How much sales are they giving us? Category sales. Any idea what category sales is? I think Lexi can say what category sales are, right, Lexi?
I'm not sure, like, kind of what context you're asking. Like, are you
in your business, right? If you take a look at
yeah, like, you mean like as a distributor, like category selling?
No, so when you go into a distributor, so you talked about alcoholic spirits, right, and beverages.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm sure you have different levels of spirits, right? You have certain.
Yeah. So we have like anything that costs from like $3 a bottle all the way up to thousands of dollars a bottle. So.
Exactly. So you could say, for example, you could have hard liquor, beers. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are categories. So essentially, you could have a distributor who's buying multiple categories of products. That's what I mean.
Yes. Yeah. True.
That's what I mean. So essentially, or for some of you, it's not categories of products. It could be, for example, you could have multiple business lines, and you could have a customer who's buying from multiple products from different business lines as well. So it could be that as well. But I thought category sales, since Lexi, you mentioned you're the closest to CPG, consumer packaged goods. I thought I would bring you into the conversation.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Yeah, we have all different kinds, and we sell to all different kinds of
Indeed, right?
consumer.
Indeed. So essentially what you then try and do is that if Lexi has to go and try and take a look at which distributor do I want to work, then you could say, well, that distributor is much better because he or she carries all the categories of products that we can sell, and they are promising us so much growth in each category. Right, and that distributor might be much more important to you than another distributor who might only be being one category of products. Does it make sense? So again, depending upon how you do this, you could also use this to take a look at your distributors and say which distributor is more important. So segmentation need not just be with your end customers, but depending upon who your customers are, you could be taking a look at your portfolio of customers as well. Right. So moving on. So essentially, category sales is that, okay, how many of each particular category am I selling? What is a growth potential that we are looking at, right? Or if some of you, I think one of you mentioned that you are in innovative pharmaceutical services. So sometimes you might have to ask yourself is that, well, there are some customers who you need to go visit them like tens of times before they're willing to take a risk with you. Whereas other customers other early adopters might be, you know what, I don't need that much effort. I buy into it, I buy it immediately. So sensitivity to effort is another way of how the customers behave that you could use to segment your markets. Loyalty, is the customer loyal to us or loyal to the competition, is another way of trying to take a look at it. Response to innovation, again, that's linked to sensitivity to effort. So is the customer an early adopter, a laggard, an innovator kind of stuff as well. So you can use that based on the behaviors of your customers. But the most difficult, as I said earlier, is the needs of the customer. And here, the needs can be directly linked to the benefits of the customer. And that is pretty much why the more you dig into the needs-based segmentation, the more you are preparing yourself to be able to create value for the customer, make sure that you can deliver on it if you have the capabilities, you can price it right, you create value for the customer, and you're creating value for yourself. And what are the different kind of needs that you can see? Okay, is the customer focusing on the product, or are they focusing on the technology, or do they want to focus on service? And I will come back to this later on. Is the customer buying centrally, or do they buy, if the customer is located throughout the United States, they have different kind of buying centers, then do you have to go to one particular place, and if you sell to that person takes care of everything else? That's a more centralized buying organization as against decentralized. Do they have the expertise, or are they going to rely on you for the expertise? Because then if they rely on you for the expertise, then part of the value that you create is as much the product as it is the knowledge that you bring to the customers. The buying infrastructure. So essentially all of these are things that you could use to try and segment your markets. And what you will need to understand is that you might start saying, wait a minute, which is the best possible way for us to do this? And you'll see that the best companies will actually have a combination of 2 or 3 criteria as well, right? And then here is an example of a company. I'm not at a liberty to name the company, but this is a company that where every year I go and train their folks. It's a global organization. They make steel. It's around $80 billion. And essentially what they do is that they have taken what I proposed, and then they start taking a look at, okay, they have their own names. They say economic criteria, technical criteria, and they look at behaviors as a criteria. Their idea of economic is very close to profiles. Their idea of technical is the closest in terms of needs. And their behaviors are very close to the behaviors that we have here as well. So if you notice that, you can go take a look at it afterwards. So CapEx versus OpEx. So this is a company that sells a lot of equipment. CapEx stands for capital expenditure. OpEx stands for operating expenditures. And again, these are things that, I mean, if you do not know what they are, you can go look it up. It's not very critical for this class unless you happen to be in a business where you are selling capital equipment and you want to ask, is the customer focusing on the equipment cost, or are they looking at, okay, it's not about the cost of the equipment, it's about trying to make sure that I keep the equipment running all the time, and how much am I going to spend on it as well, right? So those are some things. But if you have questions about this, please send me a separate note and we can always talk about this. But I think in the interest of time, you just need to understand that there are companies that use different criteria for segmentation. And again, Why are we talking about segmentation? Because of the fact that different segments have different needs. So which means that if I have to be customer centric, if I have to make sure that I'm able to meet the needs of my customers, I should be able to make sure that I know who are my customers and how am I segmenting them as well. Now, segmentation is one part of it, right? So segmentation is pretty much what I say is that, okay, I have these great products and great solutions, and I'm looking for potential customers whom I can build a long-term relationship with. But then you start finding yourself, wait a minute, based on what I'm looking for, I've identified 10 to 15 different segments, right? And then you start asking yourself, part of customer relationship is as well is knowing your ability not just to identify the needs of the customers, but also your ability to say, do I have the capabilities to go out there and deliver on the promises that I'm making to the customer? So which means that, do you want to be serving all of your customer segments? And that is going to be very, very key. So if you take a look at the next step is when I say, why am I doing customer centricity? Who am I focusing on? That's a segmentation, but you don't stop at segmentation. You start asking yourself is, amongst all the segments that I identify, which are the ones I'm going to go after, right? And here, this is one of the things that has come from the consulting company McKinsey. It's used by companies like GE and everything else. GE not today, but when times were good, General Electric. And essentially what they do is that actually you can take a look at the market attractiveness and substitute this with segment attractiveness. So is the segment attractive? Is it growing? Right? Does it have a good growth potential for the next 2-3 years? So you have multiple criteria for this. And then you identify them into low, medium, and high. But then asking whether a segment is attractive is not enough. The question is, hey, within those segments, how do those customers perceive us? Do they think that we are not a very good supplier? So which means weak. The way you would interpret this is the customers here look at us as being a weak player, and they're more likely to view the customers as better, right? Contrast that with the strong one, where here what it means is that when it says a competitive position is strong, what it means is that the customers are likely to view you as a strong player with a good brand, and when compared to the competition, right? So what you then do is that you take a look at all the segments that you've identified, and based on the characteristics, you start putting them into each of these buckets. So the way you would interpret this as this particular quadrant would be, the market is not, or the segment is not that attractive, and your positioning there is really weak. So which means this is a no-brainer. We should not be focusing on this, right? Yes, you have done your segmentation. Yes, you have identified them, but you have to ask yourself, which one are the ones I'm going to go after? And you will see that if you take a look at this, you could say, you know what, amongst all the different segments that I identify, I am going to focus on 3 of those segments, and the 3 segments here make sense, right? This is a no-brainer. This is a segment where the market is very attractive, or the segment is very attractive, and the potential customers here think that we are a strong player, right? The next one, this one is also makes sense. The market might not be as attractive, but your cost of acquisition of your customers might be lower, because at the end of the day, you have such a strong reputation that it might be easier for you to attract the customers. On the other hand, you could also focus on these segments of customers where the attractiveness is very high, but here you could run the possibility of facing those those competitors who would be fighting for market share to get the customer and take it away from you. But because here this is fair game, because here you do not know if the customer is going to favor you or the competition. So again, if I, based on the criteria here and taking a look at the markets, I come up and I cut and dice it, and I find there's a lot of customer segments, then the question is, which ones do I choose? Then you start asking yourself, well, this is one way by which you try and say, okay, I'm going to take a look at all the segments, I'm going to put them in these blocks and choose 2 or 3 where I say I have a very good chance of winning, and I can keep my customers satisfied there without going bankrupt, right? And here is an example of another organization that I had a chance to work with, but in this case it was an MBA student of mine whose project I supervised. And essentially what they did was the way they segmented the market. So if you take a look at all this, it says minerals, pulp, metals. So if I go back here, so what criteria do you think they used to segment the markets? Take a look at this slide, and anybody. If you take a look at profile, if you take a look at behavior and needs, and I show you this example, and take a look at this, what criteria do you think they used for segmentation? Anybody? Come on now. Go ahead, Brock.
Can you flip back to the other slide real quick?
Let me go back here.
Sorry. Industry.
That's the profile, right? So essentially, if you take a look at this, industries verticals, that's what it is. It just says which are the industries your customers are in. Absolutely, right? And what I absolutely love about the way they've done it, and I think it's very small, you guys should have the PowerPoint presentation with you, and I absolutely love this. And when I saw this, I was so happy when I saw this, because what you have is you've broken down the segments here, and you start asking yourself, okay, market attractiveness. How do I define market attractiveness? I define market attractiveness by these variables. Market attractiveness is based on long-term growth rate. How much is the competitive intensity? So do you have too much or less competition? What is the risk in the industry? How big is the market? And can we be profitable there? The competitive position is again evaluated by saying, hey, can we create value for the customers? Is there a fit between what we have to offer and what the customer is looking for? Do we have a very strong technological expertise? How much market share do we currently have? And when compared to the competition, how much more expensive are we? And this is done in detail. And then essentially what happens is this is done by marketing. These criteria are set by marketing. These values are set by top management. And then the salespeople start analyzing in their markets how attractive are each of these criteria. And they score every segment based on this. And based on this, you have a final score. And in this case, the decision was made that yes, all of these segments, if we as a company had the resources to go after, we would. But given the fact that we have limited resources and we cannot satisfy everybody, we want to make sure that those segments we go after, we are able to deliver the right kind of value. And that's pretty much what they use here. And in this case, they decided that anything above a score of 7. So this score, this weighted score, is a combination of market attractiveness and competitive position, which, by the way, is a much easier way to make a decision rather than arbitrarily assigning numbers here, right? But it is this slide put into numbers, and based on this, you will see that the company said any score where the segment scores 7 or above, we will take a look at 2 segments because we only have the capabilities for 2. And you will see in this case that there were 3 with the score of 7 and above. 1 was with water. But what they decided to do was that in this case, this company was looking at minerals and reciprocating power generation, where they had a lot of expertise. The 7, they had expertise to go after this. But unfortunately, it was based on expertise from a company that had acquired. So they decided that they would focus on these 2 first before they went to the next one. But again, this is how you try and ask yourself, yeah, I want to focus on the right kind of customers, but then I need to really ask myself, do I know those customers? Can I serve those needs? Do I have the capabilities to make sure that if I choose those customers, can I fulfill the needs of the customers so that they become long-lasting customers of ours, right? So that is pretty much where we are. And let me again take a short pause to see if you guys have questions. If not, I want all of you right now to just type down how you currently segment your markets. I don't want targeting. I just want to know, how do you segment your markets? Do you do it based on, here, let me go in here, based on needs, behaviors, or profiles? So just type it down. So just 1 word or 2 words. By the way, if some of you use a combined version, that's fine as well. That is, a combination could be, I'm looking at industry, but within every industry, we try to see whether the customer is looking for product or price. So again, I just want to see how your organization looks at segmenting its markets. Yeah. So I see Joe, you say needs, combo, but needs is something that you take a look at, and your needs, okay. Good. Now, of course, the idea is that make sure that when we talk about needs of the customers, that it's not needs as you think you know what the needs of the customers are, as against do you exactly know what the needs of the customers are. Just be careful about that as well, right? Because part of customer centricity, part of delivering a great customer relationship goes back to your understanding of those needs and asking yourself, can we fulfill those needs of the customers? Right? It should not be, I think these are the needs. That's making an assumption. The question is, do we exactly know the needs of the customers? Because if not, it might actually be better for you to go with a profile and industry, because at least you know with your experience that yes, there could be individual differences between companies, but at least within an industry, more or less the needs are kind of standard. So again, be very careful when you choose, because a big part of your ability to deliver value goes back to knowing the needs of your segments of customers. Right? So now, any questions so far? All right. If there are no questions, let's go back. And again, let me again jog your memory into what are we talking about here. Is we said customer centricity is about why are we being customer centric? Do all customers want to be customer centric? Do all customers have the same needs? No, we said no. That's why we have who. Who are those customers? And who are those customers who are asking for customer centricity? That's your segmentation. The next thing is, where am I going to create value for my customers once I know who those customers are? And then we'll talk about value proposition and how am I going to do this. So in today's session, we will go in and touch on all of these as well. Right? So now we were talking about targeting. And the next thing which I want to talk about is, we said the purpose of doing all this is to try to identify the needs of the customers. And before we go start talking about where can I create value amongst the chosen customers, I need to understand that when I try to talk about needs of the customers, not all needs are going to be equally important for the customer. And this is one of the ugliest model that you might see, but it's one of the most widely used model in terms of trying to understand what are the different kinds of needs of the customers. It was made by a Japanese professor who said not all needs are equally important. Some needs are more important than the other needs, right? And the first classification for saying what are those needs and how do we take a look at them is saying, okay, are the needs of the customers something that the customer clearly articulates and lets you know, or are they much more unspoken needs? And here within unspoken needs, there are two kinds. There are unspoken needs where the customer was not speaking about this because they expect you to know about it, right? A simple example is if I go to a bank and a bank says, hey, I'm going to keep your money safe, you are actually going to laugh because you're not going to specifically tell them that, hey, I'm coming to a bank because I want to keep my money safe, right? It's mostly because it's an unspoken need. But it's again, the assumption here is that, hey, if I'm coming to a bank is the expert at this. They should know what I'm looking for. So there are some needs which are unspoken, but unspoken because the customer assumes that you would know about it. You as the supplier would know about it. But there are also some unspoken needs, which is what we call latent needs. These are needs that the customer even does not know exists, right? Why is that important? It will become very clear when we talk about the different kinds of needs. So how would I try and understand what are the different kind of needs, and how would I make sense of this very ugly model? So what you have here, hopefully you're seeing my cursor, is you see at the top, you see a person with a bow tie who's extremely happy and delighted. Or you go all the way to the bottom, you actually see a customer who's extremely unhappy. Now on the right hand side, you see a beaker which is full in blue. And the idea here is that the Supplier here fulfilled the needs of the customers, and the other extreme is where the customer's needs were not fulfilled by the customer. So now pay attention to what I'm going to be saying. The first need is a basic need. A basic need is a need that the customer will not tell you. It is an unspoken need. But it is an unspoken need because the customer expects that you already know about those needs of the customers. Now, if you fulfill those basic needs, the customer, if you notice again, the way you see the green arrow and the tip of the arrow, and it's more towards the blue beaker, full beaker, what you see is that here you see that here the needs are well met, but because of the fact that the customer thinks this is so elementary, so basic, that I'm not necessarily going to be happy. And this is typically where they say, you know what, why are you making a big deal of it? This is what I'm paying you for, right? So if you fulfill the needs, the customers will say, so what, that's what I'm paying you for. But if you mess it up, there are no chances for you to build a long-lasting relationship because the customer is unhappy. Now, I also call this must-have needs. These are needs you absolutely have to fulfill, whether the customer is telling you yes or no. You have to fulfill this. The next need is a performance need. A performance need is an articulated need. This is a need that the customer tells you this is what they want, right? If you fulfill those needs, that's where you have the blue arrow tip and more pointing out towards the blue beaker with the full beaker. Again, I'm explaining this because I'm assuming in case you do not see my cursor moving on the blue arrow tip out there. A performance need is one where if you do a good job of fulfilling it, you see that it's closer to the customer being happy. But if you do not fulfill this, you see that the customer, again, this is not fulfilled, the customer is more unhappy. This is what I call need to have. So these are basic needs are must have. These are need to haves. And then the last one is, as I said, is an excitement need, which is an unspoken need. But the difference between an excitement need and a basic need is in an excitement need, the customer does not even know that the need exists. So which means that even if you do not fulfill it, if you go take a look at this towards the left hand side, even if you do not fulfill it, it's above the threshold because the customer does not even know that the need exists. But if you do a very good job of fulfilling those needs, the customers will be delighted, right? And I call this nice to have needs. And let me pause for a minute and say, why do I say a nice to have needs? This is an excitement need. And why do you think I say it's nice to have, but not a must have or a need to have? Bhagavat, you there? Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. So why do you think? Why do you think I call this a nice to have?
Can I see the slide one more
Sure.
time?
Take a look at this. Yeah. So again, if you go back, this is a must have. This is a need to have. This is a nice to have. Again, remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please. Yeah.
So as far as my understanding with that, there's you fulfilled a need and have gone beyond that need to basically excite the customer.
Yeah.
To maybe even think about a need that they didn't think of before.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's nice to have.
Nice, but again, if I give you the fact that you have these three needs and you have to prioritize which needs to fulfill first for the customers, which one would be the first need that you would fulfill? By the way, I'm not picking on you, just because to make it a little
Sure.
bit more lively than just hearing my voice all the time.
Absolutely. I think prioritization would be based upon what is So all three of the needs are expected of the are expectations from the customer.
Well, yeah, but the fact that, remember what I said, excitement needs are needs that are based on needs that the customer might not even know exists.
Right.
So if I have to keep my customer satisfied, what do you think I have to do first before I can talk about excitement? So let me give you, okay, I'm giving it away, but still. So if I have to prioritize, tell me now. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I have to prioritize the expectations, I would look at the need that that's the most basic need that they want fulfilled
Absolutely.
from us. So.
And that's why. So make a link to what I said. It's must-haves, need to haves, and nice to have. Nice to have is it's nice to have, but hey, get my things right first before you can talk about delighting me. You see what I mean?
Absolutely.
Delight me on the things that I'm asking for. If that's something that I did not know, hey, I could live without it before, and I can live without it moving forward.
Right.
But fulfill what I am asking you for first. And that's how you need to take it and understand. And it's sort of explained in the time category here. So what it says is that when you delight a customer, what happens to their expectations? Anybody? What happens when you delight a customer?
They want more.
Yeah, exactly, right? They want more because your expectation has gone up, because the need is no longer an unwanted need. And it's no longer a need that they do not know about. Now it has become obvious. All right? But then what happens then is that if the customer's expectation goes up, do you think they want to pay a higher price to get that delight? In most of the cases, that's not the case. So what happens is, what is an excitement need becomes a performance need over a period of time, will become a basic need over a period of time. So you need to be very careful about delighting your customers, because if you're delighting the customer by trying to fulfill an unmet need or a need that they do not even know exists, and the competition is not doing it as well, be aware that the moment you fulfill that need, the customer's expectation goes up, the customer is not willing to pay a higher price. And if that happens, the customer gets a lot of benefits, but what happens to your cost to serve? Your cost to serve goes up, because when you take that extra effort to keep the customers delighted and the customer does not want to pay for it, then you are not as profitable. So it is, yes, you are maintaining the relationship, but it comes at a price where you will not be profitable as well. So the way you would interpret this is, there are three kinds of needs. My priority as an organization is to fulfill the basic and performance needs, because these are needs that the customer is aware of, right? And once I fulfill those two needs, then I can start talking about delighting them with needs that they do not know existed. Now, of course, it's not all the time this way. So, for example, if you're there and you're entering a market where there's a saturation, there's a lot of players doing the same thing as you are, and then you come in and say, you know what, I'm going to shake up the market. I'm going to try to fulfill those excitement needs over and beyond what others are doing. Then it's a strategic choice to delight your customers. But as much as possible, I am not a very big fan of delighting your customers. And the only time I say you want to delight your customers, which is fulfill the excitement needs, is when you know that your cost structure, your ability to deliver on the increased expectation, because the customer gets excited, but they update their expectations. And if your business model allows you to be cost efficient, only then can you go about fulfilling the excitement needs. And even when you do that, you should have fulfilled your basic and performance needs of the customers first. So again, priority wise, fulfill the basic and performance needs first of the customer if you want to keep your customers satisfied. If you want to delight them, that is great with your excitement needs. But be aware that if you delight once, the expectation of the customer goes up, your cost to serve that customer is likely to go up. And unless you can make sure that that excitement that you're going to create is going to justify your ability to be profitable in the future or gains advantage, do not spend way too much time trying to keep your customers excited. Try to make sure that you fulfill everything. And if you do want to provide an excitement need, tell the customer it is only for a limited time. And if the customer wants the same level of service again, that they have to pay for it. For those of you who might have heard of the concept of a freemium model, does anybody know what a freemium model is? Anybody? A freemium model. What is it, Kylie?
Yeah, so it's kind of leading up to paid content. So you offer like blogs or some kind of content, and then you ideally get an email from that. And then from there, you say, if you liked this so much, pay for an upgrade and receive more content or something along those lines.
Excellent. So, Bob, I see that you are also typing something, but I guess you are also in the space where I'm sure you have freemium models as well. So, tell us a little bit more about what you wanted to type. By the way, thanks to everybody who contributes. Yeah, Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to go on the concept of like applications, and most apps are freemium, where you are using the service for free, but you're getting the advertisements and all their data mining everything, all the information about you as the user.
That's one aspect, right? But there's also another one which is saying if you want the basic model of it, you get it for free, but then anything more than that, you pay for it. Huh? By the way, one of the first examples of freemium was Skype. When Skype first came out, what was the whole thing? If you do Skype to Skype, computer to computer, it was free. But if you want to call computer to phones, you would pay for it, right? But the freemium model was to say, hey, if you can find a computer and you can talk to another person with a Skype account, you can do it for free. But anything more than that, additional products, additional services, additional features, you have to pay for it, right? And depending upon the kind of business that you're in, you will see that it works in different ways as well. And that is what the freemium model, the idea there is that, yes, if you can tell the customer that, hey, I can delight you once, you can see it. And if in the future, if you want to have that same level, you can come back. And this happened to me a couple of times personally, and not that I can do anything about it, is when I used to travel a lot in my previous job, they would bump me up to business class. And for those of you who travel about 6 or 7 hours on long haul flights, all it takes is one business class and it ruins the rest of economy flying for flights above 6 hours after that. And it really, really messes you up. And I think McKenna knows this as well. That also happens when you go to hotels and they bump you up. And then once they bump you up, suddenly every time, even normal hotel stays don't look good anymore. And suddenly you want to go back. And again, that's you delight the customer once, but you tell them it's only once. And that happens a lot. And that's where the excitement. So again, why am I saying all this is that if you're there in normal situations, you need to fulfill the basic needs first and the performance needs next before we can start talking about excitement. Now, there's one more thing which I also want to let you and want you to keep in mind is that we've just talked about segmentation, right? I want you to understand that what is basic for one segment could be a performance for another segment. So not all needs are same. Not all needs in different segments have the same connotation. So what is basic in one segment could be performance in another segment as well. So for classical examples, so if I take a look at it, let me ask you this question. So you guys are most of you, if you're based at least in Indiana, think of your local electricity provider, right? What do you think are basic needs with an electricity provider? What do you look for in an electricity provider? Since there are two people, okay. Lexi, you were typing first, so just say it out loud. Reliability. So Kylie, what do you mean by reliability? Oh, Lexi, go ahead. Sorry, Lexi, go ahead. What do you look for?
I was just going to say, like, the most obvious one, well, like, electricity. That's what I look for in my electricity company.
It's
and
interesting.
then on top of that, just like, I mean, you don't really get a huge choice. You just kind of get what you get. So just kind of like reliability. Like if something goes wrong, they're like here whenever I need them or.
Interesting.
Yeah.
let's take a look at this. Essentially, I think Bhagavat is very unique. He says certified. I want to know what that is. So give me a minute, Bhagavat. I'll get you in just a minute. Reliability. I think Kylie is right. So essentially, when I take a look at my electricity provider, the first thing, the basic need is actually 24/7, 365, right? Okay, if you want to be particular, 24/7, 365 and a quarter. Right? Every 4 years we have a leap year, which means every year we have a quarter of a day extra. So 24/7, 365 and a quarter. Now, it's very interesting that none of you specifically said 24/7, 365, because in your head, reliability automatically, that is what it is, right? You just assume that the electricity company should know about it. Now, if I tell you 24/7, 365 and a quarter, that is basic need for you, that at one point in time, there's a country in the world called Nepal, where they had, at one point in time, they had so much problems with electricity that they had 16 hours in a day where people went without electricity. Not all parts, only some parts. Now you tell me, if I'm an electricity company and I go to this particular region in Nepal, and I say I'm going to give you, not forget 24, I'm going to give you 20 hours of electricity in a day. Is that going to be an excitement, or is it going to be a performance need or a basic need for them? And I don't need you to type it, and that's what I want you to understand, is that if I go to different parts of the world, what is basic for one segment could be an excitement for another segment, right? I know it's a very bad example, but I want you to try and grasp this in your head, is that what is basic for one segment could be an excitement for another segment as well, right? Now, Bhagavat, I have to ask this. What do you mean by certified?
Yeah, I misinterpreted the question a little bit. So I was thinking more along the lines of an electrical company that you would hire as a provider to eliminate any kind of electrical issues. So certified and bonded.
That's fine. That's interesting, because when in the past, I've not worked with electricity companies here, but when I was in Belgium, we have trained some people in an electricity organization. Mm-hmm. And what you see there is certified, is having certified technicians is a performance need. Because if something goes wrong, so first of all, 24/7, 365 is what is referred to as a basic need, but having certified technicians who can fix the problem very fast is what is a performance need when you look for in electricity provider. So you're not that far away. So I think we are there. So that's okay. But
very
again,
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, but so hopefully everybody sort of gets where I'm trying to go with this, right? What I'm trying to say is that we need to understand that not all needs are the same. You need to prioritize on your basic and your performance needs first before we talk about excitement needs. There could be situations where you might want to use excitement needs, but that is because you want to prove a point to a customer and show the customer what they're missing out on. But then you have to very clearly communicate to them that, hey, if you want that level of service, then you have to make sure that you have to pay for it more. And the last one is, if you're going to segment my markets in different segments, basic for one might be a performance for the other. So again, that's one of the things that you need to keep in mind as well, is not all needs are the same. Making it a little bit more complicated is the fact that, yes, if you are in business to business, and this is an example from another company that I have trained, where in this case is that if I'm talking about the needs of the customer is not one entity in a business to business case. In this case, you see that this organization worked with customers, and there were close to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different profiles in the customer's organization. And as you can see, there's a plant CEO, and I guess you have the devil in purchasing, and you have R&D and engineering. So this is a company that actually made furnaces, not furnace at home, but furnaces, industrial furnaces, where you would melt metal and stuff like that. And the idea here is that not only should I try to identify what are the different kinds of needs, but I also have to identify what are the needs of every member in the customer's decision-making unit, right? Even if you piss somebody off in any one of these, or you're not able to fulfill the needs, it could be that your customer relationship could be derailed. It could go off the tracks because any one of these people might say something bad. Of course, some people have more power than the others, but that could also have a big impact on the customers being satisfied. And if the customers are not satisfied, then they're not going to maybe form a long-lasting relationship with you as well. So again, I'm stressing this again and again because when we talk about customer relationship, it is about saying different segments of customers have different set of needs. Not all needs are the same. Some needs are more important than the others. And even when I go into customer by customer, that there are multiple people in the customer's decision-making unit. You will hear the term DMU a lot. Anybody who is in sales, you should know what I'm talking about. You will hear things like a buying center, a buying unit, or a decision-making unit. That is all the people involved in the customer's decision-making process. When in an earlier session, when I said there are 6.8 people involved in a customer's decision-making unit, this is a recent research by Gartner. What, again, you're trying to talk about is all of these different people. Now, to make it really scary, but at the same time, there are ways of going with it, is that each one of these people are going to have needs. You need to start thinking about which need is a basic need, which need is a performance need, which need is an excitement need, to start prioritizing. And you have to do this segment by segment. And that is what is the next step. If I know that, okay, I have the segments, I know the needs, but the question is, where can I create value for my customers, right? Let me again pause for just a minute. Let me see if you guys have questions. Any questions? You can type it in, unmute yourself, ask me some questions. If not, if you're also watching Netflix on the side, let me go ahead with the next part of the presentation. So we said the whole aspect of this is why, who, where, what, and how. Customer centricity is about why should I be customer centric? Well, if I'm going to be customer centric, who are the different types of customers? That's where segmentation comes in. The next thing is, once I know my segments, once I know the needs that the customers are looking for, the next thing is, where am I going to be creating value for those segments? Again, understand that when I talk about where am I going to create value, this is, you need to be thinking about it from segment by segment. So again, methodology that we use here is what was referred to as, this is, I say, where can I create value? And this is what is referred to as a customer activity chain or a customer process. For those of you who might have done inbound marketing and marketing automation and demand waterfall, you might also hear the term customer journey. But the key difference between a customer journey and here is, a lot of times when you hear the term customer journey from a marketing perspective, it usually stops at the point where the customer buys from you. But a true customer journey is when it does not end at when the customer buys from you. It also happens when the customer takes your product, starts using it, sees the value that you promised and you've delivered, and then starts using it in their production line to see the benefits that you have promised to them during the sale, and do they continue working with you moving forward, right? So a lot of times when people take a look from a marketing perspective on customer journeys, usually it stops at the point where the customer buys. But what we are referring to is, where can I create value, is you can create value not just up to the point where the customer is buying from you, but also later on when the customer takes control of your product and your solution, puts it into their production line, into their supply chain, into their value creating process. And how can you create value for the customers? And a nice example of that is a customer process or an extended customer journey. But you will also hear the term customer workflow, or you will hear the term customer activity chain. All of these refer to this. And here is an example of another company that I've had a chance to work with, this is a company that makes glass that goes in amongst many applications. In this case, the segment of customers was in the automotive segment. So this was an example of a company. I cannot name the company, but it is a competitor of Saint-Gobain. So Saint-Gobain, some of you might know, I think they have a facility in Fishers, I think. Saint-Gobain, and they make glass. Saint-Gobain is a French company, but this company that I'm talking to was actually a competitor of that. And to make a long story short, this is an automotive manufacturer. So in this case, the customer was BMW. So some of you might know the BMW, the German car manufacturer. And when compared to the price of a BMW car, the price of glass is peanuts. So you might have heard the term, when compared to the price of a car, glass is seen as a commodity, right? Now, when you are a commodity, what does it mean to you as a supplier? When you're selling something that is seen as a commodity, what does it mean to you as a supplier? Anybody, just type in your responses, please, or just unmute yourself and answer. So if you are seen as a commodity supplier, what does it mean? Anybody?
Just very little thought on the rebuy, right? Like they're just cutting you a check and you're just supplying a set number.
Indeed. So a commodity. So essentially, yeah. So what Brock is talking about is a repercussion. So they just cut you a check. They don't spend too much time negotiating with you. And the assumption there is a product becomes a commodity when there's not too much differentiation between what you have to offer and what the competition has to offer. A product becomes a commodity when the customer knows what they're looking for. Because if the customer does not know what they're looking for, that's where you have your salespeople and your marketing people coming in and creating value and creating solutions and everything else. But when the customer knows what they're looking for, and when there's enough competition for the customers to shop around, when the point of differentiation is very, very low, that's when a product is seen as a commodity, where the only way you have in terms of creating value to a large extent is by trying to lower your price, because you become what is referred to as a me too product. Andrea, you can just unmute yourself, Andrea, if that's okay with you. So rather than typing it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just what I was going to give an example of this commodity was like flour, sugar, like in the food industry.
Indeed.
You know, unless you're looking for gluten-free, like a specific.
Fantastic. Love it.
Those type of things would be, in my opinion, a commodity.
Exactly, right? Because the fact is that, see, when I say, unless it's gluten-free, for example, right? Now you should ask yourself is, why is that a specialty? Because there's only maybe a very small group of customers who might want it, right? Mm-hmm. And which means that it might not make sense for the big manufacturers to say, wait a minute, should I have a separate production line to make something that is going to be profitable for me? You see what I mean?
Right. And that's why, like, on the labeling and things like that, when you're talking about, made in, they have to put on there made in a factory that may contain nuts, things and like that, because that, like what you're talking about, those lines, that has to be something all different, sterilized and coming through the different chutes and stuff.
Indeed. And when that happens, always, so in this class, think of it from the viewpoint of, yes, you want to serve a customer base with a particular product, but think of your cost to serve. Huh? Because if I have to have that, I need to have a small production line. I might have small batch sizes, which means that I'm not looking at a very big production line, which means that somebody has to pay for it, right?
Right.
Which means that it's no longer a commodity, it's a specialized product, right? That's why if you go take a look at anything that is specialized, you'll see that it's more expensive than things that are actually a commodity. So if you go buy salt, unless you say, I want a very specific kind of salt by a specific brand name, then it's a commodity. That's what it is. Again, and in each one of your cases, that's what it is. Anytime you have a product, and the commodities need not always be just with salt and stuff like that. It could also be products that can be easily replaced. And then if you have enough substitutes for it, then it also becomes a commodity, because they could say, hey, I don't want to buy this, but I can get something else. So that is what a commodity is. And the reason why I say this is that in this case, going back to the example that I'm showing here, for BMW, which is the thing in green out here, as far as they were concerned, when compared to the price of a car, a ton of glass that they would use to put into the windshields is peanuts, right? Now, if they view the glass manufacturer as a commodity manufacturer, then in their head, well, I can buy the glass from you, I can buy the glass from the competition, and I know that the quality is going to be good, then of course I can push you down on prices, right? So I'm just setting the stage for you, right? And on top of it, in this case, what happened was this organization was 5% per ton of glass more expensive than Saint-Gobain, which was their closest competition, right? And so essentially what they said was, wait a minute, if we lose this order, if BMW decides to go to the competition, we have lost this customer for the next 7 years. Why 7 years? Typically in the automotive industry, is when a car model goes into production, it usually stays in the production for around 7 years, and the supply chain in most of these automotive manufacturers is so tight that they do not change suppliers once they decide to work with a particular supplier. So in this case, what was happening was that they were selling a product that was seen as a commodity. They had a competition that was 5% cheaper per ton of glass. And what they did was, this company, they said they went back to headquarters. In this case, the headquarters was in Japan. And they said, hey, can we do something about lowering the price? And they got back a mandate from headquarters saying that, you know what, there is no way that we can lower the price anymore. So see whatever way possible for you to get the order. If not, we will just lose that customer for the next 7 years for that model of car out there. So what they decided to do in this case was, they said, you know what, why don't we do a voice of customer exercise? And I'll get back to what is referred to as a voice of customer, VOC, exercise later on when we talk a lot more about value propositions at a later date. They talk about, so essentially what they did was they said a voice of customer. What is a voice of customer? Is they decided to say they're going to identify one salesperson, one product specialist, one finance person, and one customer specialist from the glass company. They decided to go and understand the process that BMW undergoes when they produce a car, install a windshield on it, and goes all the way till it goes into the market. So let me try and explain the steps in green out here. So again, what is the customer looking for? This is the kind of the customer journey, the customer workflow. There's a pre-designed phase where the customer, in this case BMW, takes a look at what kind of car model do they want to manufacture. Can they get enough components? Can they be price competitive out there? Not the glass manufacturer. Can BMW be price competitive? Then they look for suppliers who may be able to provide them with the products, and then you have an RFQ. For those of you not in sales, RFQ stands for request for quotation. And then based on that, they nominate a supplier. Then they start code developing with the supplier. Then they do pre-series testing. SOP stands for start of production. They take delivery of the glass. If they have claims, this is where if they have problems with the quality of the glass, there are claims. Then they do an audit of the relationship. And then you have the aftermarket. Aftermarket is once it's sold, and if they say, for example, you have a break in your windshield, then you have to go out there and you have the aftermarket as well. So just to give you an idea, is this phase where you have pre-designed to supplier nomination is usually 2 years. And then after that, it goes rapidly, right? So in this case, they already knew that they were 5% more expensive. So what they decided to do was they decided to identify what are the needs of BMW in every step along the way, in every step of the customer's chain, customer's process. Why do they do that? Because the more I understand the needs of the customers, the more I can start asking, well, does the customer have pain points? Does the customer have problems that our competition right now is not fulfilling. So it's no longer a very high level view. It's actually digging deep, understanding your customers very well and understanding the customer's workflow very well, right? And they identify different set of needs, but the problem is when you have all these needs, you do not have two things on top of this. You first of all do not know how do you compare your offer with that of the competition. And the next thing is going back to what we were saying earlier with the Kano model, is the Kano model says that not all needs are equal. The question is, I've identified all those needs. Now I need to find out which need is more important than the other. So what they then did was, this is pretty much where I literally got goosebumps again when I saw how they went about dealing with it, is what they did was they said, okay, let's take a look at this and let's say for every need, by the way, this is the same graph, same diagram, but here right now it's the same, but except that right now what you've done is you've started benchmarking your offer with that of the competition. You see the happy face and the sad face and the neutral face that says, are we better than the competition? Are we as good as the competition? But then they started also looking at classifying each of the needs into basic, performance, or excitement. Now, why do you think they classified the needs into basic, performance, or excitement? Again, anybody? Why? Yeah.
So they can fulfill the basic and performance needs with the excitement.
That's it. Exactly. So of course, if I have to know that there are so many needs, and my question is, where should I go tell my customer that the competition sucks and they suck in fulfilling a need that is important to you, dear customer? Does it make sense? But you do not want to be better than your competition in a need that is not critical for the customer. Then the customer is going to say, you know what, the competition is 5% cheaper. But if I can go and show that we are better than the competition in fulfilling a need that is of critical importance to you, then maybe that 5% difference could be offset by how you fulfill the need. And that's what you also need to understand. You need to understand where I can create value over and beyond what my competition does. Right? So that is pretty much what happened here. And what they found out was that the customer, in this case BMW, was not happy with one of the proposals of the competition, which says, it says res engineer. Res engineer stands for a residential engineer. What does it mean? Is the company BMW had a lot of problems about the quality of glass that would come up at the production line. So essentially imagine that I'm producing cars and it's a well-oiled machine. I need to produce so many cars in a day, and assuming that when I'm trying to fix the windshield, there's a batch of glass and there's damages in it. So which means that your production line stops. And so what they said was they wanted to have somebody on site at the production line from the customer's organization, from the supplier's organization, who would be out there and help solve the problem. And so what this company said was, you know what, if you're not very happy with it, how about we come in and we fulfill that need? We will throw in a residential engineer who will be helping you out in case you have a problem. And here we are better than the competition. Now, of course, when you do that, remember, this company that we're talking about was 5% per ton of glass more expensive than the competition. Now, what happens when on top of this you also throw in a residential engineer, an engineer who's going to be on site, which means that you have to pay this person to be there, which means your cost to serve just went up, which means that you just became more expensive than the competition. So you're already expensive. You understood the needs, and then you decided that you're going to go ahead and then you're going to add this, and you just became more expensive. And they did that, and guess what happened? And I would not be talking about this if this was not successful, is they actually ended up winning the order because apparently what they found out was that for BMW, any delays that you would have in your production would mean that your end customer, that is any one of you who is going to buy a BMW car, might have to wait longer to take possession of the car. And BMW is not a cheap car to buy. So which means that if they wanted to keep their end customers happy, paying this extra was peanuts when compared to what the customer was going to pay for the price of the car. So actually, by better understanding where they could create needs for that particular customer and identifying which need is more critical than the other, this organization was able to actually even go past a pricing argument, because now they're talking about a value argument, but they only got that by understanding where they could create value in the customer's complete activity chain as well. Now, one of the things I said earlier as well was this, right? When I said, well, not all needs are equally important, that in some needs are more important than the others, and what is basic and performance for one segment might be an excitement for another segment, or vice versa, right? So what they did in this case, why am I saying this, is that they took this example and they tried the same trick with another company called Volkswagen, right? And I'm sure you know the company Volkswagen as well, the VW. So you have the oh God, what's the movie? Herbie Goes Bananas, the Beetle. You have the Beetle. They also do the Touareg, and they have all these VW, which was also in the emission scandal. But when you take a look at VW, when you take a look at Volkswagen out there, Volkswagen caters to a much more price conscious audience. So for example, if residential engineer is seen as a performance need for BMW, it is seen as an excitement need for Volkswagen. So which means that if you use the same method and tell them that we're going to be more expensive because we're going to give you a residential engineer, Volkswagen says, you know what, I don't want to pay for it because my end customers don't want to pay for it. So be aware of the fact that when you are talking about customer relationship, you are going to be dealing with different segments of customers who are going to have different set of needs, and different needs are going to have different levels of importance, and you need to fulfill that before you can actually go out there and talk about long-lasting relationships, right? Let me pause here and see if you have any questions. Yes, Andrea, Lovebug, and there's also a new movie as well. I believe the new Bumblebee Transformers movie is also with Bug as well. So anyway, so questions? If not, I'm just going to skip a slide and I'm going to get into, we talked about the concept of why, who, where, what, and how. So the next thing is, we know why should we be customer centric. We know who is about customer segmentation, where is about customer workflows and customer activities, and the last one is a value proposition. And what is a value proposition? Before we read this, let me ask you, if I ask you what is a value proposition, what would you tell me? Joe, are you there? So think about your organization, Joe, and tell me, what is your company's value proposition? Joe, you there? Joe is not there. So anybody else? Bob, let me ask you. So you say you work in the edutech space, right? So if I say a value proposition, right?
Yeah.
And you said you're in customer success, correct?
Yes.
Which means that value proposition and delivering according to your value proposition is extremely critical part of customer success, correct?
Yes. It's
Indeed. So tell me, what is the value proposition? How does your organization understand what a value proposition is?
Our value prop is what we try to communicate to our prospects, I guess, and leads to what. So I work in ed tech, and we have a platform that they use. So our value proposition is trying, and we're still kind of working through different ones and see which ones are successful being a startup, but just trying to set the expectations of where the value is for the product that they use.
Indeed. So essentially we talked about value, so which means that you're talking about benefits, right?
Yeah.
Good. You're talking about benefits. Now, is that all there is to your value proposition, or is there more to it?
For us, it's more to also like how they would use it, and like you said, the benefits that they would receive for it. Like with dealing with an auto grader, the biggest benefit that our instructors are having is they're saving time.
Yeah.
You know, the time in grading, that the value that we bring in there is all that time that they don't have to do that it's automatically done.
Indeed, great. So that's only one part, right? You're going to talk about this now. When you're talking about value to a customer, by the way, this is for everybody as well, right? I'm sure that each one of you are thinking about, hey, I'm going to go and talk about all the benefits I'm going to talk to and give to my customers, right? When I say a value proposition, what else do you need to think about? Because what happens, value is a perception sitting in the head of your customer, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's what.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I would also say it's what the company represents. Is that what you're looking for?
Interesting. It's also what the company is. Essentially, that could be a benefit, right? So if your company represents something, that is a kind of a risk reduction for the customer, saying, okay, I know what you stand for, which means that at least I know that you know what you're talking about, or you know what you're doing, right? Startups have a difficulty there because if you don't have a brand recognition, it becomes a little bit more of an issue, right? Yeah. Let's say you've done that as well. But when I am thinking of value, right, think about when you want to buy a car, right? You go in there, do you only choose one car, or do you also look at multiple kinds of, unless you're so crazy about one particular brand?
No, you check your other options.
Absolutely.
What's available.
Exactly, right? You look at what's available. So which means, and now tell me, if I'm now bring it back to your business, I talk about benefits, but my customer is also looking at you as well as the
competitors.
There you go. Which means that it's not that it's only you delivering benefits. So your competition is also delivering benefits. Correct?
Correct.
The question is, why should your customer choose you over the competition? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And that is true for every one of you out there. In fact, the biggest value proposition that you need to do is actually for yourself. Because you should ask yourself, why should a company choose you over the others, right? So even if you've never done value proposition in a company, you should always ask yourself is when you sold yourself to a company or your spouse or your partner, you actually had a value proposition that, again, maybe you do not need to articulate it the way I'm saying it, but at the end of the day, anybody has a choice of choosing from different suppliers. The question is, why should they choose you? For example, I go back to a very, very bad example, but again, hey, it's 9 o'clock in the evening. So my value proposition to my wife was my parents were 5,000 miles away from where she was, which would mean that she would not have to see them all the time. Now, her value proposition to me was her parents don't speak English, which means that I don't have to talk to her parents at any point of time in my life. Right? They only speak French and they speak Chinese, and I don't speak both the languages. So that's a win-win. So, but in her case is that I had to compete with every other able-bodied Frenchman. So my wife is French Chinese. I had to compete with every other able-bodied Frenchman or Italian or any other European. And my value proposition always were, you don't have to deal with my parents. They're really, really far away. So again, it's a bad example, but still the idea is that anytime you're talking about value, you should be able to tell the customer why they should buy from you as against the competition. That is what a value proposition is. The key to a value proposition, though, is I should exactly know what are the needs of my customers, translate that into benefits, and still, once I have the benefits, I should benchmark those benefits with what the competition is offering so that I know what are my points of differentiation. For those of you who are in businesses where there is no direct competition, and here I'm thinking about those people coming up with innovations or things like that, then your competition is going to be the previous generation of product which the customers use to fulfill their needs, right? And that is what a value proposition is. Why should you choose us instead of the competition, right? And hopefully the customer should not be choosing you because you have a low price. The customer should be choosing you because you have the best possible value for what they're looking for, right? And that is what a value proposition is. And what I'm going to do at this point in time is that there's some more slides out there which you can follow by yourself. But what I'm going to do is that I am going to wait, quick question. Did I send a set of articles that talks about customer value propositions? Did I send you a list of reading materials either last week or the week before where I had customer value propositions? Does anybody remember that? If you could go back. So essentially what I'm going to do is that I am going to send you two things. I'm going to send you an article on customer value propositions. If I've already sent it, just bear with me, but then I want you to read it. And then so that based on what you're reading off that is, I want you to send me an email with a couple of questions. I will give you instructions for this. This is not an assignment, but again, I'm going to ask you to read the article on the concept of customer value propositions. It's a brilliant article. My following slides are based on that. And I will also send you a link to a 3-minute video of one of my old videos of the place where I used to work before, where I try to explain what a value proposition is, right? And what I will need from you is, once you read that article, I just want you to try and tell me what your take on value proposition is, and if you have any specific questions pertaining to that. I'll give you very specific instructions. So because I think value proposition is something that I would really like to see how you guys think about value propositions for your own organization as well. So I'll send you that article, and I'll send you a link to a couple of short videos that tries to explain all that we have talked about right now. Is it okay? And then once we do that, when we come back to the next class, when I do my next recording, so next week there's no class, but I will do some recording where I am going to finish up this presentation. So where after you have read the value proposition article, I will go ahead and I'll give you my thoughts on each one of these. So the article I'm going to send you is where this particular slide is taken from. And then we will have a discussion then, or at least I will take a look at what your value proposition is and give you my thoughts on it. And then I will then start talking about the concept of what are the basics of services. So next week will be a recorded session, but I will give you very specific instructions of what I'm looking for as well, especially with the reading that I'm going to send you tonight or tomorrow, right? So if there are no other questions, we will stop at this point in time, and I will be sending you that stuff first thing in the morning. But before we go, any questions? Again, next week and the 2 weeks after that, there will be no class at this point in time, but I will be sending you recorded presentations. And my only request and my apologies for what I have to do that way, but my only promise to you is that if you have very specific questions from my recorded sessions, that if you send me your questions, I will record it in a separate session and I'll answer those questions as well, right? So again, thank you for your patience. I will be sending you again the article, and I think I have another article that I want you to read as well, and then the link to a couple of short videos about value proposition and customer centricity, and I will also make sure that I'll give you instructions for next week as well. All right. Can the questions we send you be in an email? Absolutely. Email is pretty much, yeah, that's fine. I think do send it an email. I'll make sure that even though we are technically not meeting face to face, or at least not face to face, over Skype next week, I still have your questions and I can answer those questions in line with the short kind of assignments I give you as well. All right. If there's nothing else, I thank you for your time. I hope that none of you are starving. I am. And what we'll do is that we will again meet at least over this medium, like in the first week of July as well. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. And again, I will post the recording of this session tomorrow. All right. Ciao. Bye.